Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Linda, and thank you to AAA, the Atlanta Area Evaluation Association, for the invitation to come and speak to you all today. Like Linda said, my name is Paida Chikate, and I am a PhD student at the University of Minnesota. Yeah, there we go. I'm originally from Zimbabwe. So I came here to the United States when I was 18 years old, about a decade ago. And I did my undergraduate education here, and then I went on to do my master's at the University of Minnesota in public policy. And right now I'm pursuing a PhD in evaluation studies and data analytics. And my current role professionally is as director of evaluation at a national organization called World Savvy. And our work centers around K-12 education and how to infuse global competency into K-12. I always get the question, like, why evaluation? And it's quite difficult to answer because I always think I fell into it. I didn't really choose it. But I've been kind of intentionally trying to think of why I decided to join the evaluation field. And like I said, I'm from Zimbabwe. So in 2018, I went home and I was able to vote for the first time in my life, right? And I've been wanting to vote for a really long time. But if you know anything about Zimbabwe, you know that the country is a dictatorship, and it is extreme oppression of human rights happens on a daily basis. And as a result, since I turned 18 and was eligible to vote, I wasn't able to vote. But in 2018, I was like, you know what? What's the worst that could happen? So I went along with my mom and we went to vote. What I noticed is that there were observers, election observers. So there were election observers from the SADC region. So from Botswana, Zambia, Mozambique, South Africa. And then there were also observers from the United States and some from Europe. And their job there is to look to see if Zimbabwe is having a free and fair election, right? Because I think the country always espouses, hey, this is what we're going to do, and they're there to observe. And in many ways, their role is as an evaluator. They're evaluating the electoral process and trying to see how free and fair these elections are. And once I saw that, I said to myself, you know what, I want to be that person. I want to look into programs, I want to look at projects and see whether they're working, whether they're not working, and the reasons why. And in terms of why evaluation ethics, I think the importance of ethics for me personally has become very much front and center. I think even in our personal lives right now, there are a lot of decisions that we make that are based on our values and our ethics. So, you know, sometimes people who drink oat milk, it's not just they like oat milk, they have some, you know, values and ethics that they are really attached to that make them choose that over cow's milk, for example. So what are ethics? Singer, who is an ethicist, talks about ethics as being the discipline concerned with what is morally good and bad and what is morally right and wrong. But the truth of the matter is that it is not as simple as that I wish it was. Ethics are divided into three main areas: meta-ethics, normative ethics, and practical ethics. Meta-ethics is the philosophical approach to ethics that explores the origins of questions about ethics. So when we think of meta-ethics and evaluation, we're thinking of the musings of, let's say, Morris, because he writes a lot on ethics. What Morris was thinking about when he was like, what should our ethical approach be in evaluation? So it's very much theoretical level. And then normative ethics address the nature of right and wrong and how to differentiate between, you know, what is right and wrong. So now we're moving more into the AEA guidelines and how those may, in some ways, tell us what is wrong to do as an evaluator and what is right to do as an evaluator, although they don't prescribe us to do that, but they mention some of these things. And practical ethics deals with the day-to-day decisions that people make and us as professionals and apply in their private and professional lives. An example is the oat milk, right? You have a practical ethical reason why you would choose that over something else, or why you wouldn't buy clothes that are made in a sweatshop versus not made in a sweatshop, right? Those are practical decisions that you're making based on your ethics and your values. So at present, the field of evaluation includes guiding principles that mention ethics in their meta and normative forms, but we do not have a clear field-wide practical ethics that has been operationalized. And that's what my research centers around. So my PhD research focuses on empirically studying and operationalizing practical ethics in evaluation, and doing that as an approach in a field that I think should adopt practical ethics for, even if it's for the reason that we do very practical work. I think it's the most appropriate for our field. So I want to talk about the premise of the research that I ran with Dr. Lavelle. So Dr. Lavelle was my co-investigator, and thank you so much to him. He is also from the University of Minnesota. He's also my advisor, and has been very interested in ethics and values even before I came here. So a starting point for us as researchers was to establish what evaluators think about ethics and values to begin with. In this study, we asked a series of questions about individual ethics, work values and ethics, professional values and ethics, and then evaluation practice ethics. The purpose of the study was for us to surface empirically the values and ethics that are espoused by evaluators and how they can help us better understand our work as individuals, but also as a field. So we looked at people having different values and guiding principles that are really important to them. And then we also questioned, how important are ethics as a guiding principle in your everyday life? The theoretical frameworks that guided our research are listed here. So like I said before, we wanted to look at, the values, work values, career commitments that also talks about work, political values, and then evaluator practice values specifically. And the last one, moral foundations theory, was a way for us to see how those are kind of compared across the United States, but also internationally. Haidt and Graham talk a lot about the impact of moral foundations, and they do that globally. So wanted to use that as one of the theoretical frameworks. So talking about survey respondent demographics, to me, this is always very interesting. I love to see who is responding to our surveys. So who responded to the survey? The age range of our respondents was between 25 and 74. And you can see the breakdown, male, female, some who declined to state, and then those who wrote in a response. I think this is definitely in line with the reports that I've seen in previous years from AEA about the field of evaluation being very much a female-dominated field. I think the last time I looked, it was 66, and now it's 73%. And then the racial makeup of our respondents, white or Caucasian was 75%, Hispanic or Latino 6.5%, Asian and Pacific Islander 2.2%, and Black or African American 3.3%. And then there were some who declined to state as well. So the education and location of our respondents, only 3% were graduate students. That was quite surprising to me because a lot of our respondents came from AEA and a lot of students are part of AEA. But an overwhelming majority, 96%, were professionals who are actually practicing evaluation, so not solely on the education sector. 36% held a master's degree and more than 60% a PhD. And then in terms of location, 85% were US-based evaluators, and then internationally were 14%. So I'm just gonna check my chat. Okay, perfect. So we wanted to look at evaluators in politics because, as we all know, this is something that is extremely, that affects our lives on a daily basis now. And so knowing that evaluation exists in a very deep political milieu, wanted to make sure that we accounted for politics, as it clearly have a big impact on one's ethics personally and professionally. We asked respondents from a scale of very liberal to very conservative the following questions. How would you describe your general political views? How would you describe your political views on social issues? And how would you describe your political views on fiscal or monetary issues? So I'm sorry, this may not be as clear from your end, but the sample of evaluators are very liberal on general political views, as well as very liberal on social views, right? And I think that was expected. We actually have research that has been done in the past that has kept that very consistent. There's also a considerable share of evaluators who are fiscally somewhat conservative, but none in the conservative or very conservative categories. I will say that we should take these data specifically about politics with a grain of salt, given that we're living in a very politically charged environment right now. And at times people are just not willing to say exactly where they land, even if questions are, if confidentiality is being respected. So I would take this with a grain of salt. So some of our results in terms of, what do evaluators actually care about? What are their values and what are their ethics? We asked the questions, what do evaluators value in everyday life? And we started with this one because we wanted to see in general how evaluators feel about the things that happen in their life and what comes up to the top. Social justice was right at the top. I think it was 75% of evaluators thought that was very important and they valued it. Family security, true friendship that is, made up of supportive friends, a varied life filled with challenge, novelty, and change. I think right now, challenge and change are very much part of our everyday lives. And then a world of beauty. And that I think was specifically highlighted because people really cared about protecting the environment. Other values and ethical standpoints that rose to the top included broad-mindedness. So evaluators really cared about having an open mind, both as an evaluator, but also with the stakeholders that they work with, and being tolerant of different ideas and beliefs. Protecting the environment, like I mentioned, independence, so being self-reliant and self-sufficient. And this included, being able to work the hours that they want to work or engage in the contracts that they want to engage in. Loyalty, and then honoring of parents and elders was also another one that rose to the top. Next, we looked at what evaluators value in their work. So evaluators said that they really loved intellectually stimulating work, encouraging work that encouraged continued development in knowledge and skills. And that one especially was expected because evaluation is a field that is changing constantly. And in many ways, a lot of the tools that we use are coming up as we move on. And evaluators want to keep up with what's in the market and the tools that are coming up. Making social contributions through the work that they did. To me, this really related to that personal piece of social justice, that they wanted to have, some kind of social contribution that showed that their work was not just their work, but part of their life. Providing a feeling of accomplishment in their work, and also being able to develop their own methods in doing the work. And that one for me actually was also expected because we have more than 18 evaluation theories, right, that have varied methods. So it's not a surprise that folks wanted to develop their own ways of doing their work. And then other things that came up were independent working conditions. So being able to work from home, being able to work from wherever they are in the world was really important. Work that required working on problems of central importance to stakeholders. So there was a stakeholder piece that was very important to evaluators. And then being respected by others was really important as well. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the role of the AEA guiding principles in evaluator ethics, because I think they do provide some sort of framework for us to work with. Some parts of the AEA guiding principles directly address ethics. and they prescribe specific ways of practicing evaluation. So for example, principle A, systemic inquiry, cautions evaluators to be wary of the ethical implications of technology in evaluation practice, and an important consideration in an ever-changing technological world. And then principle D2 directly addresses ethics, stating that evaluators must abide by current professional ethics standards and regulations, including informed consent, confidentiality, and prevention of harm, especially when it's pertaining to evaluation participants. So there is a role that the AEA guidelines is playing in terms of ethics. But the AEA guiding principles, although not explicitly about ethical conduct, have some components, like the ones I just highlighted, that address ethics for evaluators. So we wanted to know about evaluators, how familiar they are with these guiding principles. And then we juxtapose that with whether or not evaluators thought that, the same principles were important in their work. So the chart here on the left-hand side shows you how familiar evaluators are with guiding principles, and then they're reporting about importance of guiding principles. And this was on a scale, the reporting was on a scale of important, very important, and this was the very important part. And you can see that there's a gap there. So most evaluators fall into the moderately familiar category and the guiding principles, but evaluators also thought that the same principles were very important to their practice. So what does this mean? Just from, preliminary observations of the data, there's a knowledge gap that exists, and evaluators are not as familiar as they should be with the guiding principles, although they think that these are very important parts of their practice. So this can also be seen by folks like me in academia, where I was actually thinking to myself, have I ever taken an evaluation ethics class? And the answer to that is no. It's just, we just don't have it in the curriculum. So if we don't teach about evaluation ethics, but we think they're very important in our practice, then there's something that's missing. So, it's a space for us to be thinking of and how we can further engage so that we can actually get people to know more about the guiding principles. So the good news is that evaluators think these guiding principles are really important to evaluation practice, but the gap between how familiar they are with them and the importance in practice is really of concern, because as you can see, 30% of folks were familiar, but up to 92% thought respect for people was very important in their practice. Again, like I said, it does, however, create some space for more education around these principles to be implemented in the long run, so that evaluators can more effectively incorporate the guiding principles into their practice. So what do evaluators want us to know about ethics? What we wanted to also establish is give space for evaluators to tell us what they wanted and what they thought was interesting about both teaching and practice. So we asked the question, what is one thing teachers of evaluation should know about how your ethics or guiding principles influence your evaluation work? And to me, the qualitative pieces are really always so interesting when you can get people to really speak their minds. And these are some of the things that came to the top. I didn't highlight everything, but I wanted to, take a look at some of the things that evaluators said should be taught to those who are going to be rising in the field. So the fact that, evaluation is political and it's messy, but we should also really embed ourselves in that. We shouldn't shy away from it. And that we should know that we're here to make a difference. And generally that teachers of evaluation should teach ethics, right? So we're really starting from the ground up, because if students of evaluation don't know that they should be ethical, act ethically, then we already have a gap once they go into practice. Continuing with, one thing teachers should know, it's important to know that the guiding principles are there, but that they can change over time. Political choices that this evaluator said they make are strongly linked to, their values and the ethical principles and how they guide their practice. And that the AEA evaluator competencies are important, and being truthful about data is really a great way to advance justice and equity, all components of ethics and our values as people. We then wanted to know what other evaluators wanted other evaluators to know about ethics and its influence on their practice. In many ways, stuff that the data that came out of this part of our research were very much in line with the AEA guidelines and the principles. So I think in general, we're on the right trajectory with having those AEA guidelines. So folks talked about integrity, transparency, honesty, and trust, and having, a participatory approach as a way to promote social and economic and environmental justice. Starting off with standards that are above reproach and then maintaining them throughout our evaluations. Again, listening, honesty being fundamental to our work, honesty again, and reporting it, especially in reporting our findings, contributing to improvements of whether it's a program, a government, ministry, being transparent, and then first do no harm. And this is just a small sample of what respondents said, but I will say that honesty, integrity were among the top two that evaluators were mentioning as being something that another evaluator has to know about their practice. So I wanted us to have a little bit of time to do an evaluator ethics activity. And the purpose of this is really my dream is to have evaluators have a peer group where they can go with their problems about any ethical dilemmas that they may be facing. Because I think we face them so often, but we don't have this collective of people that we can just go to at any time and say, hey, Linda, I have this, problem. What do I do about it? Have you faced this in the past? What advice would you have for me? And in many ways, that is the dream for me, to create something of that nature where evaluators can just go forward to, I don't know, ethics board or whatever it is, and talk about the dilemmas that they have, so that we're looking at our ethical dilemmas on the front end, instead of once a program is now in such a bad situation that it can't be rectified. So if we can, in this, in a couple of breakout rooms, we'll just do a quick round of introductions, so like your name, where you work, or where you go to school. And then if you can name one challenge each that you face in your evaluation practice that has really created an ethical dilemma. And please don't overthink this. It's not any like logic model stuff. It's just like, whether it's large or small, it can be communication, can be stakeholder engagement, it can be anything. It doesn't have to be a big challenge. And then we'll just do some reporting out to have, one group have one challenge per group that they can share with everyone else.
Okay, so I've just opened all the rooms. I'm going to stop the recording as we move over to breakout rooms. Okay.
Thank you, Linda.